Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto returned as a villain Shinju god? Naruto times Kagaya times Hinata times Sakura times Ino times Tsunade times Mei times Konan times Karen times Tamari times Tenten times Yugito times Samui times Mabui, Judgment of the Shinobi World, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The Uzumaki groaned. It was like one thing after another with his life. Both Sasuke and he had put aside their differences to work together to defeat Uchiha Madara. Imagine their surprise when Black Zetsu not only betrayed and stabbed Madara in the back but returned his mother, Kagaya Otsutsuki, to the world of the living. Hell, imagine everyone's faces when Black Zetsu admitted to being the physical manifestation of Kagaya's will. He also admitted to instigating many of the events that shaped the shinobi world to secure her revival. From manipulating Indra to go to war with Asura to Madara believing that his Tasuki no Mi Kikaku, Eye of the Moon plan, was a way to bring peace. Looking up at the rabbit goddess, he could say no previous battle he ever had came anywhere close to matching the against her. Not Pain's. Not Orochimaru's. Not Kabuto. Not even Madara was this tough. It was Sasuke and him versus the mother who gave birth to the Rakudo Sennin, Sage of Six Paths, the mother of all chakra. Even with the powers they gained from Hagoromo Jiji, they were getting tossed around like mere insects. His numerous scars were more than enough to back him up. It was only by quick planning, their instincts, and pure luck they had survived this long. At the end, they were able to surprise Kagaya and used the opportunity to seal her in her Black Zetsu. However, Naruto, being a quick thinker, realized that there was a possibility that a day would come when the seal would fail as all seals do, and she would be free to begin his terror once again. Only this time no one would be able to stop her. He decided to use a technique, one which he knew was risky, though he had no other choice. So with the help of Kurama, the combined chakra of the Biju, and his Uzumaki sealing knowledge, he used the very technique the Sage of Six Paths used to seal the abomination Kagaya had transformed into within his body. It was a suicidal move, which would no doubt mean his death, his human body unable to handle the enormous supply and intensity of the Shinju divine tree, the primordial being of his world, chakra within the demi-goddess, but he had no choice. At first, she just stared smugly down at them as the seal had seemingly failed after it started shining. However, before the self-proclaimed goddess could make a snide comment, she let out a painful shriek before she was sealed inside the Uzumaki. A number of things transpired after this event. One being Naruto going through a shit ton of pain he had never ever felt before. A Chidori to the chest twice couldn't even match this pain. The second being Sasuke's Six Paths chakra forcefully leaving his body. Hence why he's currently screaming in pain. Oh yeah, the third reason being he unintentionally awakened his Otsutsuki genes. You might be wondering how exactly Naruto of all people is related to the alien race which are the Otsutsuki. It's quite interesting actually. He was a Uzumaki, whose distant cousin clan were the Senju, who were the descendants of Hagoromo Jiji, who was the son of Kagaya. A race that had the ability to adapt to any damn thing, increased brain power for getting out of some of the most situations possible, or bodily adaptations, which was what allowed Kagaya to even gain the ability to wield chakra from the Shinju fruit in the first place. All the chakra Kagaya, Sasuke, and he wield began to bond and become his. Awesome, right? No. The pain was incredibly painful, from the second it entered his body to finally when it stopped. And then it wasn't just them three. Kurama's and the other Biju chakra still within him and those taken from Kagaya began to adapt to his body, turning him into something completely different. The sudden surge of power threw both his teammates and people around him back violently before he blacked out. As the rest of the Alliance and the Edo Tensei cages arrived on the scene, they saw Hagoromo stopping Team 7 along with an mad Sakura and Sasuke and a worried Kakashi. What the hell is going on? Tsunade yelled. Seeing as how every member of Cell 7 was there except for Naruto, her heart started beating rapidly. Sensei. Naruto Baka did something to Sasuke-kun and this old man won't let us go past. Sakura screeched, damaging everyone's eardrums with her loud voice. I'd advise you to treat my son and Hagoromo-sama with more respect, little girl. Minato said, glaring at the Pinkett. She glared right back and was about to retort until a vicious inhuman roar was heard. Arhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh. What the hell was that? Tremari muttered. Naruto-kun, please be okay. Hinata thought. Suddenly a swirling noise was heard behind Tsunade, who was currently facing the alliance. Glancing behind her, everyone got into a fighting stance as a portal opened up and out came Naruto. Or at least what they thought was Naruto. This Naruto was 6 feet 4, a large height improvement from his old 5 feet 10 height, even more muscular clearly shown from his now shirtless torso as he sported a 8-pack, which most of the women shamelessly stared at. He had 10 long, fox-like tails swaying comfortably behind him, 2 sets of horns, short ones sprouting from his forehead, sprouting upward, and a larger set from the top of his head like Kagaya. His hair had turned from a thick spiky yellow like his father's to a spikier, thinner, silver white like the rabbit goddess's, though he had one bang that covered his left eye from time to time. His whiskers had turned thicker, giving him an even more feral look. His left eye, while hidden, held a 4-ringed Rinnegan with 9 tomos. His right eye was much to Sasuke and Sakura's jealousy and anger, a eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Its design was 3 lines inwardly swirling around a star-like pupil and 3 more thicker lines in the same manner. Around his neck was a necklace which was made up of 6 black magatama. On his back was a black Rinnegan marking with a pattern of 9 magatama arranged in rows of 3 beneath it, though it was slightly covered by his newly acquired 6-path Shikuho with its second end shaped like a half-moon, each side representing the sun and moon respectively. The air around him carried nothing short of superiority and dominance, his eyes looking upon every single shinobi in sight with a bored gaze, as if he could see straight through them, down into their souls. His new appearance more and more intimidating by the minute. Even Hagoromo was speechless, he had no idea that this would happen. He could feel the fear, hatred, worry, and anger swirling from the shinobi in front of him. Though the strongest source of anger was coming from the boy's 2 teammates. What they didn't know had a whole new counterpart by his side now. Naruto. Minato called out, daring to step forward. Yo! Everyone had a near heart attack as they heard the demonic tone his voice carried. Naruto noticed how his voice sounded and looked to Hagoromo to explain for him, who nodded. As the Sennin stepped forward, he glanced around at the men and women of the alliance who had fear, awe, and anger in their eyes. For some reason, he knew this wouldn't end well for Naruto. To their credit, no one interrupted the man while he explained just exactly what the hell happened to Naruto. From start to finish, both Sasuke and Sakura had something to say but were silenced by glares from Kakashi, Tsunade, and Minato. So let me get this straight, Mei said. Naruto-kun sealed this Kagaya inside of himself, awakened the genes of an alien race, and became this Ashirado no Kami, god of the 10 paths. She asked. Naruto chose to answer this time. Yes, that's correct. Kurama before I absorbed him told me that being related to Hagoromo Jiji meant that I was related to Kagaya. The bonding process was incredibly painful. I'm honestly glad I blacked out when I did. What do you mean absorbed, Kurama? Isn't he and the others sealed inside you with Kagaya? Hagoromo asked. As Kagaya did her best to fight against Kurama and him, the other Biju and their fellow containers had joined in to help subdue her. How they did it, where they came from, he didn't know. He was just grateful they came. Shaking his head, he spoke quietly. Kagaya didn't go willingly, so they had to subdue her long enough for me to absorb her entire being. However, they ended up getting absorbed too. I tried to talk them out of it, but they told me it was either they all go or the world does, with me reforming in a couple of years. Judging from the fact I'm still here, you see what choice I made. As they all reformed together, they recreated the Jubi and increased my chakra to levels beyond comprehension. The Uzumaki said, trying not to laugh at the jealousy and hatred displayed from his teammates. The sage couldn't help but look downward at the knowledge his children had died. While he was proud of them for dying for a valiant cause, he felt their deaths were just untimely. Sensing the elderly man's emotions, he put a hand on his shoulder. If it makes you feel any better, all of them, especially Kurama, said they loved and would miss you. That brought a smile to the man's voice, however it was short-lived. Dobi, give me back my power. Sasuke yelled, marching over, followed by who else but Sakura. Why do you need it? The war is over, the world is safe, and considering the fact every village pitched in to become one to beat Madara and Obito, I can safely assume there won't be any type of aggression between them. I need the power because I'm gonna be Hokage. I'm going to kill the 5 Kage, then the Biju, and whoever else decides to get in my way. I'll be the world's only ruler. A world where no one can oppose me. The Uchiha shouted, causing everyone to look at him as if he had grown a second head. Who in their right mind would make you Hokage? The taller male questioned, raising an eyebrow seeing how this was going. Konoha would easily make Sasuke-kun Hokage. He's been loved there since he was a kid. Sakura screeched, causing everyone to go temporarily deaf. It was worse for Naruto now since his hearing was now more enhanced than it ever was. I said in their right mind, you know, as insane, not mentally disabled, or flat out stupid. Konoha is filled with arrogant bigots, fools, and tyrants. From the elders, to the civilian council, to the civilians and shinobi themselves are corrupt to the core. They care not for others but for themselves and their own power ranking. Of course pathetic people like that would accept someone like Sasuke. Naruto snapped. More than a couple Konoha nin growled at what the Uzumaki said. Sure, their village wasn't perfect, but they weren't gonna let this freak talk down upon their home. Shut up. You've always been jealous of how everyone loved me. You've been seen as nothing more but a freak, a loser, and a peasant in the eyes of Konoha, but also your precious Sakura-chan. Do you really think they'll accept you now? Sasuke shouted, his eyes turning into his Mangekyo spinning rapidly. Naruto laughed. Though everyone felt shivers from the dark amusement inside it, I could care less of what any of you think of me honestly, especially those from Konoha. He glanced at the eye-twitching Pinkett, who everyone could easily tell wanted to start swinging. Something wrong, Haruno? She glared at him before channeling chakra to her fist, before rushing at him with it cocked back. When Sasuke-kun tells you to do something, you do it. She screeched. The Uzumaki simply stared at the charging girl, unfazed by her anger, and honestly disgusted by her actions. The transmission between his original personality to the one he has now was actually a life-changer, honestly. He could easily see both Sasuke and Sakura were lost causes, with Sasuke admitting that he was literally going to attempt to kill the 5 Kage and anyone else who got in his way, and Sakura, the girl, obviously was mental. Minato and Kakashi were about to stop her, but a hand from Naruto held them in their place before he glanced back at his teammate, who looked hellbent on wanting to hurt him. Let's see you talk back to Sasuke-kun now, Naruto baka. The white silver-haired nin simply held out his hand and caught the fist easily with a yawn, much to the shock of those present and anger of the girl. She let out a rage-filled cry and began swinging her fists rapidly at him, thinking more than 3 would catch him and hopefully bring him horrible pain. Only to be completely stumped as he simply batted them away without a second glance, all the while smirking. Your swings are predictable. Even now, they're unorganized and sloppy. While powerful, you're swinging like Ba-chan does when she catches arrow senin peeping on her. No type of stance, you just rely on brute force. And that is why you're weak. Naruto said as he kicked her away to Sasuke's feet. As the girl lay at the Uchiha's feet, she glanced up hoping to see approval for her actions, only to see him scoff at her, then go back to glaring back at Naruto. That's it. All this time she'd been trying to get his attention. Naruto baka would always do something to mess it up for her. Well, no more. She was gonna send him into a world of pain, more than what he felt in his childhood. By now the shinobi of the alliance had backed away, sensing a fight between the three would be inevitable, and they had no plans on intervening. To do so could have easily meant their lives were forfeit. 3 years spent under the Godime, who was not only the strongest woman in the world but the best medic, who taught you everything she knew and then some, in hopes you would make her proud. And how do you repay her? By throwing it out the window first time someone mentioned Sasuke. Every time we saw him, you'd freeze up and start crying. The tails retracted back into his body, his horns slowly shrunk into his head and forehead until they were no longer visible, and the eye slit disappeared as if it was never there. Poor little Sakura, you only joined the academy because your mom told you it would help you win Sasuke's affection. I bet she told you that if you won Sasuke's heart, she'd be proud of you and give you whatever you wanted. I'm not surprised, honestly, seeing as how both your and Ino's mom were fangirls, and quite pathetic ones to say the least. He chuckled, seeing her twitching, no doubt ready to knock his head off. They were both fangirls of Toussaint and Sasuke's dad, always fighting for their affection, shrieking, yelling, you name it. They tried dieting, becoming anorexic, wearing obnoxious amounts of makeup in hopes it would eventually charm them right into their pants. Eventually Fugaku settled down with Makoto, and dad started seeing my mom, and naturally it didn't sit well with them that a foreign girl, as they called her, caught his attention and they didn't. So they started spreading rumors about her in hopes it would make him see her like they did, a disgusting nobody with hideous red hair, ironic seeing how one of them had pink hair. Though to no shocker, it failed and the lies were easily traced back to them. So they did the next best thing in their mind, challenged her to a fight in a public place. Minato snorted. He knew exactly how that ended for the two and why he was so scared of his wife. The woman had promptly beat the girls within an inch of their lives, and when they had tried to lie to the Sandame, he immediately cleared everything up and told the truth. Afterwards he had told the girls to never talk to him or Kushina ever again unless it was about shinobi business, and that only. Following their oh so humiliating public beatdown, Ino's mom reluctantly settled down with Inoichi-san, while your mom was determined to get into the pants of someone high status. He was interrupted as the pinkett let a rage-filled cry. You're lying. My mom is the best mom ever. She told me that Sasuke-kun would love me indefinitely. I should have listened when she told me you were a demon. I should have killed you. You were always in my way. Sasuke-kun's way. You're a monster. Reject. Loser. I bet that bitch for a mother of yours was a whore like mom said. She screeched. You little bitch, I should kill you where you stand. Minato snarled inwardly. How dare this little whore call his Kushi-chan a whore? Little did he know, both Hiruzen and Tsunade were also having murderous thoughts. You know the funny thing about that? The only reason your mom even got on the civilian council in the first place was because she slept around with multiple civilians to get power. She tried it with the shinobi, though they easily saw through her pathetic attempts and decided to shoot her down. Then the Kyuubi attack came. Toussaint and Ka-san died, yet there was this blonde child with whiskers that resembled the Yondaime greatly. You still following me here? His answer was Sakura charging him with her fists raised ready to pound him into paste, though she just ended up getting kicked back again. The shinobi in cages looking on could only watch and listen as the Uzumaki destroyed the girl and her mom's image in front of their eyes, exposing just how sick and twisted both individuals truly were in the head. Even Sasuke was shocked and disgusted. Those two whores were responsible for their daughter's constant fawning over him. Sawyer and Ino's mom then devised a plan among their female members of their clan, telling them who my mother was. It was actually a clever plan, seeing as how all those females were fangirls and resented my mother for getting his attention when they failed, so they'd take out their frustration on me. Whenever the mobs rolled around, they'd roll around and help beat me, yelling things about my mother being a whore, how I was the reason their Yondaime-kun was gone. He said in a mocking tone that could only be seen as disrespectful. Sakura, seeing red, charged at him once more with a banshee cry, swinging wildly mad with rage, embarrassment, and hatred. It's even more hilarious seeing how when Sasuke left the village, Ino's mom told her that she could quit being a ninja, seeing how there was no real reason for it, and she almost did before Inoichi intervened. Ino, who was with her fellow Konoha nin, could only widen her eyes in realization. All those memories of her mother forcing her to be more girly, the makeup, the dieting, the forcing to like Sasuke. Sure, she had a crush on the Uchiha, but her mother had all but forced her to the extreme of even yelling out she'd be his wife at times, the encouragement of degrading Naruto, and even at one time telling her that if she saw him bleeding out to flat out kill him. When word got out about the retrieval squad failing to bring him back, her mother had cursed every single one of them and hoped they died a horrible, painful death. What type of woman, crush obsessed or not, does that? Especially Naruto. When her mother suggested she quit being a shinobi, she was skeptical, but after her mother telling her Sasuke was gone, there had been no real reason. She almost did until her dad came downstairs with a face of anger she had never seen before, demanding to know why her mother was telling her to give up being a ninja. This had sparked a arguing match between the two. Horrible words were launched back and forth, lines were crossed. Since then her parents never got along that well after that. Whenever her father was around her mom, he always had a look of betrayal and hate in his eyes when he looked at her. Now she knew why. As Naruto saw Sakura glaring at him, he smirked, deciding to see just how far he could break her. Why don't you tell everyone what your mommy said to you after you told her Sasuke left and you say him leave? The girl's eyes widened before glaring again coldly. I don't know what you're talking about, loser. Stop trying to lie, it's not working, no one believes you. She yelled, inwardly hoping no one would listen, though she knew they would. Naruto's smirk widened. So you mean to tell me she didn't beat and threaten to disown you because you failed in winning Sasuke's heart? When you told her of how you begged Sasuke to let you go with him, she slapped you and drilled it into your head that Sasuke was your destined one no matter who he liked. How she told you that you had better win Sasuke's heart and become his wife or she'd kill you herself. How you were nothing more but a means to fame, and if you couldn't even do that, you had no use to her. Silence. Utter silence. Everyone could only stare wide-eyed at the shaking, crying, snarling girl. Just what exactly type of up family did she come from? However, the silence was broken when the girl yelled at an obnoxiously high-pitched voice, I'll kill you. Before running at Naruto the fastest her legs could carry her. Naruto dodged her fists yet again before slugging her, sending her back a couple feet. She growled before charging him again with the intent to kill, swinging like a barbarian. You swing like a drunk man. Naruto taunted before kicking her in the face. Chidori. The faint sound of chirping birds roared up behind Naruto at the last second, who grabbed the offender's wrist and snapped it, ending the jutsu. Sasuke yelled in pain before finding himself face first in the ground with a foot on his face. Poor little Sasuke-chan. Once again bested by the dobi you love to mock. Let Sasuke-kun go. Everyone blinked. The pink kid had to be mentally deranged. Taking his foot off the Uchiha's face, Naruto then proceeded to kick the Uchiha halfway across the rocky turf. Naruto following closely behind. Sakura, seeing this, then went to make a dash to go help her crush, but found herself surrounded by the 5 Kage, who all had displeased looks on their faces, even Onoki. What are you all doing? I need to help Sasuke-kun, move. She screeched, making them wince. Why are you going to help Sasuke, Sakura? Are you truly incapable of thinking for yourself? Tsunade asked, though the look in her eyes showed how sad and disgusted she was by her apprentice's actions towards her godson. Because I believe in Sasuke-kun. I'll always believe in him no matter what. It's people like that loser Naruto Baka why Sasuke-kun is always viewed as a bad person. How exactly is Naruto to be blamed for the Uchiha's power-crazed mind? If it's to my understanding from your Hokage told me, the Uchiha was always like this. It was just ignored due to Konoha being filled with power-hungry individuals. Mei said, he's always trying to look cool. He'll never be cooler than Sasuke-kun. Did you know he was the dead last of our class? He always asked me out on dates even when I told him time and time again that I don't like orphan freaks like him. He's only strong because he's a freak. Now he's trying to steal what's rightfully Sasuke-kun's. I won't have it. Sasuke-kun should rule everything. Everyone should bow down to him. He deserves the best. Always. I'll make sure it happens because I love Sasuke-kun. The pinkett screeched with a deranged look in her eyes, not noticing how the eyes of the Kages and shinobi from other villages narrowed dangerously. Talk about mentally unstable. Minato mumbled, getting nods from those around him. Saru, how exactly did this girl become a ninja again? Hashirama asked. The Sandaime looked both embarrassed yet saddened. Due to my old age, I was unable to manage every matter that came up, so I gave the responsibility of the academy to the civilian council. He said, and was immediately smacked upside the head by Tobirama. So because of your negligence, people like that, he pointed at the fist-shaking Sakura, ended up becoming a ninja. Oh come on. She's not that bad. She just need a lot of mental rehabilitation sessions. Hashirama shouted before wincing when his brother glared at him. She needs more than that. She should have never been allowed to continue this far. She's clearly not right in the head, and the fact she has Tsunade's super strength and rivals her in medical knowledge isn't exactly good for anyone. The Nadaime said, watching as the girl flinched before glaring at Mei, who obviously said some hurtful things. Between him and Kakashi, I'm not sure who to blame. Minato said, glaring at his former student. What did Kakashi do? Said gray-haired Nin was also confused. Well, for starters, Kakashi only passed the team because Sasuke was on the team, if we're all being fully honest. Then he allowed both the Uchiha and Haruno to verbally and physically abuse Naruto whenever he did something they didn't like, yet allowed her to follow Sasuke around like a lost puppy and him to treat everyone as if they were below him. Kakashi could only shudder in fear as all four Kage glared at him. Second, you like to preach about teamwork and those who abandon their comrades are trash, yet you completely left Naruto to go personally train the Uchiha even though you knew how bad Naruto needed a sensei to help him fix everything the academy had sabotaged for him. Instead, you scolded him whenever he didn't do something right and let his teammates belittle him every opportunity they got. And finally, you blew Naruto off to go train Sasuke for the second round of the Chunin exams and had the nerve to give custody over him to someone who openly hated him because of what he contained, all because you had no confidence that he could win his fight. The Jonin could only look down in shame at the realization he had no real hand in Naruto's training. His sensei was absolutely right. Because of his commitment to trying to pay back Obito and believing that Naruto wasn't going to get far at all, he had abandoned him to the wolves without a second glance. He, like all the other Jonin, had believed Naruto's match against Kiba to be pure luck and had actually bet his money on Neji winning easily and humiliating Naruto while doing it. Anko had honestly been the only one who actually believed in Naruto and got laughed at for it. He winced. The woman had won a shit ton of money that day and she had Naruto to thank for it. Sarutobi began to chuckle sadly. It's amazing, honestly, he said, drawing attention to him, even though we all screwed up in our own way. Me with informing them he was the jailer, Kakashi favoritizing Sasuke, and the villagers and shinobi alike doing their best to make sure his life was miserable, full of scorn and hate. He never let that hold him back, and now look, he's become the strongest being the shinobi world has ever seen. The deceased Kage shed a tear looking over to where Naruto had went to fight Sasuke with a pained expression. I hope you can forgive this old man, Naruto-kun. Naruto looked over at the figure of Uchiha Sasuke, who snarled at him, his eyes glaring at him with hatred. I'm going to enjoy killing you and dragging your pathetic corpse in front of everyone you love. Then I'll piss on it before I kill them. Sasuke shouted with a deranged look beginning to show in his eyes. Naruto simply looked at his old teammate with disgust. He'd never understand what the females in Konoha ever saw in him. Then again, many, if not all of the females in Konoha were shallow, power-hungry, spoiled girls who wanted to have everything, not caring who they hurt in the process. Hagoromo could only watch in sadness. It seemed the cycle was to go on forever, One of the reincarnations, if not both, would die fighting one another. However, he was not blinded by a prophecy, so to speak. He, as well as anyone with a brain, could see how twisted Indra's reincarnation had become. Like the rest of his clan, he had been tainted and corrupted by the curse of hatred. There was little if nothing anyone could do. He had unfortunately seen what Sasuke had done while serving under Orochimaru. The pain and suffering he inflicted onto innocents were the actions of a sick and twisted being. Someone who had no possible way of redemption. He smiled as he looked at the stone-faced reincarnation of Asura. The boy had went through hell his entire life, whether it was neglect, physical or mental abuse, starvation, and just exposed to the cruel horrors humanity had to show at such a young age. There were times where the old sage was positive the boy would eventually snap and release Kurama to exact revenge. Yet he didn't. Instead, he put a mask to hide his suffering, choosing to believe that by becoming Hokage, he would gain the respect he so righteously deserved from everyone. There were doubts at every corner for the boy, whether it was because of what he held within him or due to the fact of suffering from isolation the majority of his childhood. He was different from everyone else. Though he couldn't help but think about Naruto's earlier words about Konoha. No doubt the village would attempt to kill him, seeing as how they were a lot of die-hard Uchiha supporters within the village. Sighing once again, he turned his attention back to the fight to see Naruto and Sasuke trading blows, though Naruto wasn't even really trying and was still overpowering the Uchiha. Suddenly the old sage sensed something approaching fast and rolled his eyes upon recognizing who it was. It was that pink-haired girl that seemed to be obsessed with Indra's reincarnation. Wait, some of her hair was missing along with some of her clothes. He immediately suppressed a strong urge to barf. No one should be that flat. Hearing a roar of pain, he winced as he saw Sasuke lose his hand before he was kicked into the fast-approaching Sakura. The two collided quite painfully as they groaned, attempting to get up. I expected better, honestly, with you being an Uchiha and all. Maybe with your little pet here you might actually put me on the defensive. Naruto taunted. Funniest thing about Team 7. Each member had their own personal egos. And if you disrespected them in any way, they could easily be beaten into submission due to their pride getting the best of them. With Sasuke killing Orochimaru, fighting both Madara and Kagaya and living, his ego was at an all-time high to say the least. He'd do his usual facial expression of hatred, go on a rant, and charge in with a sense of superiority. Sakura was the same. With the announcement of her being an apprentice to the Godime, he'd hear about her treating other people under her command like slaves. Doing little to nothing work-wise unless Shizune or Tsunade came to oversee her. Even himself, back when he was weak, he had an ego. An ego that never let him lose or give up, despite everyone always putting him down. It honestly made him wonder how much luck did he truly have. He watched in amusement as the two charged him with kunai, though he felt the need to puke as he examined Sakura's new look. The right side of her hair was missing, face looked swollen, black eye, and it looked like she would collapse any minute. I bet the old hag regrets giving her lessons now. The Uzumaki thought as he swiftly and calmly dodged the kunai strikes. He could see them getting more and more upset as they missed, so he decided to taunt them some more. For a so-called elite, you can't even touch me. Those eyes of yours not working. You haven't used them yet. He could see the Uchiha practically steaming from the ears. Shut up. I'll kill you. Naruto was right though. Sasuke was low on chakra, and to even attempt to use any kind of jutsu would be suicide. You kill me. Hilarious. You only beat me those times when we fought was because I just wanted to knock you unconscious, meanwhile you were trying your hardest to kill us. After all these years, I'm finally ending our bond, permanently. Just shut up and die. Sakura yelled behind Naruto as she threw a punch meant to knock his head off. Though both her and Sasuke were more than shocked when a katana sliced through her stomach and was then sent through her heart before a Rasengan to the head finished her off. The Uzumaki merely glanced at the dead corpse before staring back at the Uchiha, who looked on in fear, especially after a surge of electricity covered his former teammate's hand. For the first time since the Uchiha massacre, Uchiha Sasuke ran in fear for his life. Naruto smirked as he watched the so-called strongest of them two run with his tail tucked between his legs. It was actually amusing to see him trip over his own feet. But alas, all good things come to end eventually. Flashing in front of the Uchiha, he palmed his head staring him in the eyes, "The rest of your clan is waiting for you in hell." What happened after that could only be described as the most painful thing Sasuke had ever felt. It was as if everything on his body was being pulled apart. He could feel his grip on his life was slipping away little by little, just to make the pain all the more excruciating. Naruto felt no remorse or regret as he watched his former teammate's soul leave his body. But then again, why should he? Who in their right mind would risk their life trying to help an unstable power-hungry self-entitled who drove not one but two Chidoris through your chest with the intent to kill? He turned around as he saw Hagoromo approaching him. "I was hoping that one day the descendants of my sons would one day be able to walk the world together peacefully," the sage started with a sigh. "However, now I see such a thing isn't possible and might never be possible. That's just how the cycle is, Gigi. But I feel there's a more important subject you wish to talk about." Naruto replied. Hagoromo nodded. "You've grown incredibly strong. I fear those you call your allies will turn on you for their greedy devices. I merely wish for you to be aware of those who would betray you." The Uzumaki nodded, understanding the sage's warning. "If or when the time comes, they'll be dealt with." "That's not what I meant." "Then what do you mean?" "If the entire Shinobi Alliance turned on me with the intent to use me as a weapon, how do you think I should respond?" Quote. Exactly. Peace never comes without pain and suffering. If this war hasn't brought enough of that, then they must be dealt with. Hagoromo sighed sadly but couldn't but agree. If they still didn't know how to work together and end the cycle of war and bloodshed, the shinobi would have to be dealt with. Naruto merely walked over to Sasuke's body, removing his eyes before crushing them, then burning his body. "Better to be safe than sorry." "So what will you do now?" he asked Hagoromo. "The cycle of over. The curse of hatred has been exterminated. I no longer see a reason to prolong my death. I also believe the elemental nations are safe in your hands." Naruto nodded sadly. "I see." Hagoromo walked over and placed his fingers over Naruto's forehead, causing him to get a slight headache as he became overwhelmed with knowledge. "Goodbye, Naruto," Hagoromo said as he began to fade. "Goodbye, Hagoromo Gigi." Shinobi from the 5 villages gathered around their respective cage, who glanced back and forth at one another. "I don't know about the rest of you, but I've had enough of violence and bloodshed for a lifetime," Mei said, ending the silence. "I agree with Mei. After all this, I can go without war." Tsunade supported. "Speak for yourself, Senju. Iwa and Konoha will never be on friendly terms, and you can thank your Yondaime for that," Onoki said, glaring at the big-breasted Hokage and her shinobi. He couldn't glare at the real man because he had returned to the afterlife. The coward. His claim was supported by multiple Iwa shinobi, his granddaughter, Kuretsuchi, the loudest of them all. Nor will Kumo have any peace talks with Konoha, Mist, or Suna. Both Onoki and I only agreed to this farce of an alliance because of the danger Madara and his supporters posed. Our respective villages have lost very little shinobi compared to yours. What's stopping us from wiping you all out and taking what we want from your villages?" A said, leering perversely at Hinata. Gaara merely closed his eyes as a smirk graced his face. "Find something funny, Kazekage-sama," Kakashi said, drawing everyone's attention to the red-headed man. "Indeed, they're forgetting the biggest flaw with their so-called plan," he said. "And what is that exactly?" "Me." Everyone's head snapped in the direction and paled at the ki being sent off in numerous waves. There stood one pissed-off Naruto, whose eyes narrowed dangerously at the Iwa and Kumo nin, and judging from the murderous gaze he gave to both A and Onoki, it was safe to assume he heard everything. "So let me get this straight," he chuckled. "Even after fighting Uchiha Madara, Obito, the 10 Tails, and being trapped in cocoons and almost being turned into white Zetsu, you still want to fight? Better yet, you want to start the 5th Shinobi War?" Both sides flinched under his commanding gaze until Kuretsuchi stepped forward. Don't try to guilt trip us, Namikaze. It's because of freaks like you this entire thing started. If we had just gave you up willingly like I suggested, no one would have died. She shouted. Everyone, including her own grandfather, gave her, "Are you serious?" looks. If you truly believe that if you gave me up to them and no one would have died, you're obviously mental. But then again, seeing how you'd more than likely kill kids if they so much as resembled my father, I'm not surprised. Naruto grumbled before shrugging off the enraged look on her face. So what will it be? You waltz back to your villages alive or I send you all back in body bags? He asked, his intents making them sweat. As if, there's no way this idiot can be. Kuretsuchi's rant was stopped by her seeing her death before her eyes repeatedly. In fact, everyone in the area was unfortunate to catch a glimpse of how they would die if they wouldn't comply. We'll be taking our leave. A stuttered before he and his Kumo shinobi retreated from the battlefield. Onoki, Kuretsuchi, and Aiwa followed after quickly, not only out of fear but to scheme and plan on killing the last Namikaze heir. Naruto merely watched them flee until they were finally out of view. However, his attention was grabbed elsewhere as he sensed people approaching them. Turning, he saw Tsunade, Kakashi, Mei, Gaara, and Temari looking at him. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After a couple minutes of awkward silence, it was Kakashi who broke it. Yo. He chuckled as the others facepalmed at laziness of the gray-haired nin. Naruto-san? Mei asked. Yes, Mizukage Dono. He respectively replied. We were wondering what you would do now that the war is over and stuff. Mei silently berated herself as she felt her face burn up at his gaze. Naruto thought about it for a minute before shrugging. I might head for Whirlpool and relax there until something that requires my intervention pops up. He said. To say everyone was shocked but none more than those that knew him. Don't you want to be Hokage? Tsunade shouted before flinching as his Rinne Sharingan eye turned its gaze onto her. No, I don't understand. After all that time of you shouting about being Hokage and now you can finally being able to, you don't want to anymore. Temari asked while trying and failing to not blush at how the blonde turned white-haired shinobi's eyes roamed her body seemingly in appreciation. I was still naive back then, Temari, hopelessly believing I had a chance to be accepted. My ascension, as I like to call it, has made many things clear to me. Both about Konoha and those that live within the village. And what would that be? Kakashi asked. He knew any chance of Naruto being accepted in Konoha was slim to none, especially after his new transformation and killing Sasuke to save the world from another Madara. Regardless of what I do, I won't be accepted within that village. So why keep bothering? I'm better off on my own. I support his decision. Temari turned shocked at her little brother. Gaara, you can't be serious. You aren't against this or shocked at all. She all but shouted. I am very serious, Temari. Naruto has sacrificed his life more than once for the world, who are we to deprive him of what he chooses to do? Gaara said. Besides, the redhead's upper lip twitched. Even if we were all against this, I highly doubt we could stop him. He added. I guess. The pigtailed fan wielder muttered before she squeaked as she felt an arm wrap around her waist and pull her close to a warm and muscled body. Don't worry, Temari. I'll still show up and see you and Gaara from time to time. Naruto said before leaning in to whisper in her ear, though I'll stop and see you anytime I can. Temari's face adopted a look of embarrassment while her eyes could be seen as if they were thinking heavily about something. So how exactly do you plan on getting to Uzu? Tsunade asked, trying to ignore the fact that Naruto had just flirted with Temari right in front of her brother. Besides, didn't her and Shikamaru have a thing going on? Once again Naruto shrugged before letting go of Temari while mentally smirking at how sad she looked at the loss of him. I'll just find a way, I guess. Anyways, peace. With that, the white-haired shinobi disappeared in a swirl. It was at this moment Tsunade realized something big and couldn't help but groan. The council's gonna make me empty my sake cabinet. 5 years after the Fourth Shinobi War. After he effectively isolated himself away from known civilization, Naruto began learning just what he could and could not do. Eventually he found out, thanks to the Jubi 10 Tails, who he had named Shin, he had learned that due to Keigaya's near-endless chakra reserves combined with the unlimited chakra from Madara, his possibilities were endless. During he had discovered he was immortal as he was constantly testing life-threatening jutsu almost every single day. He had mastered all elements and sub-elements, both his Rinne Sharingan and Eternal Mangekyo powers, found out he was a sensor-type shinobi, and even accessed Limbo, that invisible world of shadows. He had originally thought about using the Byakugan, but both him and Shin decided not to. Compared to the Sharingan and Rinnegan, it wasn't anything special. Sure, it granted him 360 vision, but against a dojutsu like the Sharingan that gave him the ability to see chakra, ability to read lips, anticipate an enemy's move, and copy almost any jutsu from ninjutsu to taijutsu and genjutsu, it wasn't that cool. Compared to the Rinnegan that could master any jutsu along with all 5 elements, along with its ability to use 6 bodies which had different bodies with their own powerful abilities, the Byakugan was really a child's toy. Now that I'm really thinking about it, the Rinnegan is so overpowered it's not even funny. Today, however, wasn't a day Naruto could train. The world was so silent you could only hear rain and the sound of feet pressing against the soul as it walked past countless dead shinobi, men and women, from different villages. The blood still dripping from their bodies indicating they had been killed not long ago. The headbands ranged from Kumo, to Aiwa, to Kiri, to Suna, to minor shinobi villages, and finally Konoha. Now you might be wondering just what happened as to why so many shinobi from different villages were dead and who exactly did it. The answer is quite simple. Their cause of death was one Uzumaki Naruto. It had seemed Keigaya had kin who were still alive and had planned to steal the Shinju fruit to gain more power. Only problem with that was that the Shinju was now in turn a part of Naruto, as in something that could not just be removed. Therefore they had sought to kill Naruto and absorb his powers and body. He would not allow this to happen, so he took them both on without hesitation. From their respective planets to his. The war, if you wished to call it that, from the way the terrain had been utterly destroyed, you'd think it had lasted days, weeks, months, between Naruto's armies and theirs. You might also be wondering, what army did Naruto have? Zetsu. Naruto gathered all the remaining Zetsu that had roamed the elemental nations and Keigaya's personal dimensions of innocent humans she had trapped in her infinite Tsukuyomi and were turned into Zetsus. After being there for so long, they were now lost creatures with no real purpose. Naruto had later on found out that Keigaya had planned something like this happening, therefore wanted to have armies ready should she have to fight them. The Uzumaki had came to death many times and on the end of many taunts when he was down, only to get back up, showing incredible willpower. Plus, having absorbed a Edo Tensei Madara that had unlimited chakra helps too. In the end, Naruto had defeated both Otsutsuki after finding out their names, Momoshiki and Kinshiki, and upon having hundreds of Thusanda of Zetsu when he first went to war, he merely had hundreds. He was mentally exhausted and just wanted to relax, however it seemed he was deemed for yet another task. Saving one Hyuga Hinata from a love-obsessed Otsutsuki Tonari, a branch member of the clan. Apparently he had been watching Hinata from the moon for years and had finally decided to make her his bride. I still don't understand that part at all. He had assumed that since Naruto was preoccupied with fixing the damage left by literal invasion that had occurred, things would go smoothly and he'd have his bride. The thing was, Hinata actually wanted to be his bride. Normally he wouldn't have that many objections to such a thing. However, Tonari had expressed a deep hatred for humanity and wanted to wipe them all out. Even if Naruto only had a few friends left in the world, he still had to save it. It was like a hidden unspoken guideline you had to follow. While fighting the branch member, Naruto quickly realized Tonari was easy to rile up with taunts which led up his focus and allowed openings the Uzumaki exposed to the fullest. He defeated and imprisoned the Otsutsuki on the moon and made him watch over them as if he were a guardian. Naturally, this made the man furious as he attempted to lash out, calling Naruto all kinds of names, none that fazed him though, he had heard worse. He had dumped Hinata back off at Konoha in the arms of Tsunade and was gone without a second thought. As he returned to Uzu, he finally got his rest and relaxation. When he awoke, he was more than shocked to see Gaara, Guy, Temari, Mei, Lee, and Neji over him, making sure he was fine. He had taken of Neji's cage bird seal and simply put a cage-level genjutsu over it so no one would know the difference. In turn, he had earned Neji's utter loyalty and devotion. After a lot of time-consuming and physical straining, Naruto had gifted Guy the power of leg movement once again. Even if it was only a little. He had helped Temari get over her breakup with Shikamaru after she found out the Nara had cheated on her with Ino of all people. She had went on for hours about how whenever she had asked to spend time with him, he merely called it or her troublesome, or how he just wanted to watch the clouds. In the end, she didn't kill Shikamaru, but Gaara broke his legs. Good enough, right? Mei was. Strange to say the least. He knew for a fact the woman was attracted to him, considering how she made sure to flaunt her body every time he was near, from splashing water on her dress to show just hard her nipples were by his mere presence to even grinding against him when they were alone. Lee was there because he wanted to show Naruto how much youthful support he had, whatever that means. Gaara was simply there to show his brother he had his support during his darkest hours. Gaara, Mei, Guy, and Temari, however, came for another thing this time. It was to discuss the gathering of the 5 villages and their new current target. 1. Uzumaki Naruto. The nations had deemed Naruto too dangerous and as such decided it would be best to attack him while he was weak and still recovering. Boy, were they wrong. Their plan in their minds were quite genius. They'd attack and force him into submission before forcefully ripping the 9 Biju out from within him and forcing them back into containers, who would be beaten into submission and know their place. They would then torture him and learn everything he knew before finally killing him. When Naruto asked who was overseeing such an event in Konoha, it was revealed his own godmother. Tsunade had devised such a plan with the edging of his former comrades, the Konoha 11 and their Jonin senseis, with the exception of Guy. Apparently they didn't like how strong he was and decided they were going to make sure he was back below them as he should be. Konoha had bribed Kumo help them by offering both Hyuga Hinata and Hanabi to the Raikage in marriage, who immediately agreed, and Iwa would hang Naruto's dead body over the Tsuchikage Tower for all their civilians and shinobi to see. The councils of Mist and Suna, after realizing Gaara, Temari, and Mei wouldn't go to war against Naruto, had become fearful of being targeted by one of the 3 villages and kicked them out of office forcefully and were prepared to have them assassinated. Both assassinations failed, but at the cost of people close to both sides. Gaara and Temari lost their brother Kankuro, who covered their escape from Suna, and Mei lost her guards, Ao and Chojuro, when she was attacked by her own Anbu. Lee, Neji, and Guy told Naruto about what had conspired back at Konoha with his former friends and comrades, and he couldn't help but laugh. Despite the damning evidence of being manipulated by her mother, Ino had decided to blame Sasuke's death on him and decided to train to one day avenge her Sasuke-kun. Fangirls truly were a different breed. Inuzuka Kiba, with the influence of his mother and Jonin sensei, Inuzuka Sume and Yuhi Kurenai, had been told over and over such a thing like Naruto wasn't supposed to be above him in terms of power and needed to be reminded of that. Tenten, following the crowd of those who already disliked Naruto, found herself hating the Uzumaki simply for the fact they were both orphans, yet he had so much power and she didn't. From that point on, she began pushing herself more and more in order to show him why orphans stayed nobodies. Hinata, like Kiba, had been manipulated by not only her sensei but her clan. They had beat her into submission, then took advantage of her fragile mind, spreading lies of how no one would love her because of how worthless she was. From that point on, the girl had abused the cage bird seal as much as her younger sister, father, and elders of her clan did. Nara Shikamaru had become furious at how Temari had moved on quickly from him to Naruto. At first he had theorized it down to the Uzumaki was merely a rebound, but after seeing just how happy the woman was with Naruto more than she ever was with him, he had vowed to make the blonde pay for being troublesome. Aburame Shino, like his clan, had no ill manner towards Naruto. However, logic states that they had to turn on him in order for their clan to remain safe within Konoha's walls. The last person to display kindness for Naruto had been made an excuse of publicly. His name, Yumi no Iruka, Akamichi Choji, one to quickly follow the crowd to avoid being made fun of for his eating habits and being overweight, quickly started slandering Naruto, even going as far as to blame Naruto for the death of his sensei, Sarutobi Asuma. Mitarashi Anko, in his opinion, she was the funniest case. Once seeing how she still wasn't accepted in Konoha despite the fact they all hated Naruto more than her, she began slandering his name in hopes of being accepted. Instead, what little friends the Tokubetsu Jonin did have ended up unfriending her, seeing how desperate she was, leaving her in a state of depression. Those friends included Kurenai, Hana, and Yugao, her first friends since she had been left behind by Orochimaru. The bitch was so depressed she begged Orochimaru, he was revived at the time, to take her back as an apprentice, only for the man to laugh and call her pathetic before tossing her out on her ass. Afterwards the woman had given up and began whoring herself out to whoever paid her the most money, because in some way in her up mind, this was the best way for someone to show her how much they accepted her. To just put her out of misery, he killed her. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough with killing her, because he had to hear her rant about the way her life had turned out was somehow his fault and how he would pay for all the pain he had caused her. Count that on top of how every single shinobi coming back from the war cried and whined about how he had killed the Uchiha, Haruno, and reached a new level of power they would never reach in their existence, and you got a village of rabid dogs. Also adding in how Kumo and Iwa personally felt about Naruto, that was a large size of shinobi who were more than ready to attack Uzu and take what they wanted. Multiply that with the large portion of shinobi coming from neighboring villages, Kiri, and Suna, you'd think they were going back to war against Madara and Obito. Imagine the look of surprise of their faces when Naruto appeared before them, perfectly healthy and not weak like they expected. They then had the audacity to demand he surrender and die like the creature he was. So he just decided to start killing people. Another thing they didn't know was that during the years of his isolation, he had silently roamed their villages, copying their jutsu with his Sharingan and mastering them quickly. He especially had fun ransacking the Uchiha compound and stealing the jutsu they had and had stolen from others during the years. From clan jutsu to even their most strongest and forbidden techniques, Naruto knew it all and used it better than anyone ever could. After all, he was in fact a god with unlimited potential now, right? He had also entered the Namikaze compound by unlocking the blood seals and taking the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Jutsu, and all the other jutsu his parents had left behind for him. During the fight slaughter, if you ask any bystander, Naruto had done the same thing Madara had used in the Fourth Shinobi War, using Tengai Shinsei, Shattered Heaven. That jutsu was still highly effective. When Onoki attempted to stop it once more, seeing how in his old mind, this meteorite wouldn't be anywhere near as strong as Madara's if it was strong at all. This was obviously his undoing, as he was crushed and killed by the meteorite along with a large portion of his shinobi. Enraged at the loss of yet another family member at the hands of a Namikaze, Kuretsuchi attacked Naruto with fury, throwing out every jutsu she had in her arsenal. He merely dodged and avoided every single jutsu she tossed at him with a mocking smirk before beating her within an inch of her life, along with those idiotic enough to step in. He was however interrupted from dealing the killing blow by the arrival of Orochimaru, who was leading the Kiri and Suna Nin. The snake Sanin's appearance merely delayed the inevitable, as he killed the now deceased Tsuchikage's granddaughter with a Chidori before turning his attention towards the stunned Konoha shinobi who had arrived. His eyes glanced towards the bodies of his old comrades, lifeless and covered in blood. His eyes glanced over to Shikamaru's body to see a smirking Tamari who flung it up in the air with her fan before Gaara crushed it with sand. Like he thought they were arrogant, idiotic, and believed they were better than him. He easily tore through them and left them to bleed slowly and painfully. He then glanced at the bodies of Hitaki Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, and Hinata. Flashback. About time you got here. I was beginning to think you were just gonna watch as everyone dies then run back home. Naruto said, watching as his former comrades began surrounding him, trying to intimidate him. How idiotic. Naruto merely looked at their faces before glancing at his supposed godmother in disgust before finding the sky more entertaining than the worms around him. However, the Konoha 7, Neji and Lee had disappeared the night before their march on Uzu, took the time to look at the loser of their generation. He now wore black Anbu pants, fingerless gloves, a black t-shirt with a dark gray vest over it, his hair once white now red, as he did it out of respect for his fellow Uzumaki clan members since he would be residing in Uzu for as long as he wanted. His hair still as spiky as before, with his bangs covering his left eye, giving them occasional glimpses at his Rinne Sharingan and the Tomo spinning slowly. The horns showing off his Otsutsuki bloodline. I'm gonna show you just how much of a loser you are, Dobi. Kiba snarled. You'll be begging for mercy after I'm done impaling you with all these weapons. Tenten threatened. I'm gonna turn you back into the talentless orphan loser Sasuke-kun, Sakura, and I made fun of. Ino taunted. Fate has determined you to be inferior to the power of the Hyuga clan, you are a loser, an abomination, and will be eradicated. Hinata said without a shred of emotion. It would be illogical to try to fight back, we can easily contain the Nine Tails' power, you have no chance of winning. Shino said. Let's just get this over with, you troublesome freak. Shikamaru said. Just make this easy for yourself and give up, brat. You might have beaten the Tsuchikage and his daughter, but you can't possibly hope to beat the Raikage, me, and your old teammates. If you come quietly, we'll make your death quick. Tsunade said with no shred of remorse of her voice. Naruto blinked before chuckling softly before erupting into laughter, enraging the people around him. You actually think I still rely on Kurama's chakra? Or better yet, that I'm weaker than you? Newsflash, you aren't dreaming and this is reality. The weak ones in this fight are you, and it's time you were all reminded how weak you truly are. He said, summoning a katana. Great, now I get to hear you scream. Die, loser. Kiba shouted as he rushed Naruto with the same mindset he had years ago during the Chunin exams. He'd kill Naruto with one attack. Kujimane no Jutsu, Shadow Paralysis Jutsu. Shikamaru called out. Shintenshin no Jutsu, Ninja Art, Mind Transfer Jutsu. Ino smirked, preparing to embarrass the redhead before they killed him. The others watched on in glee as how the cause of all their problems would be eradicated until it didn't happen. In a moment of blinding speed no one could keep up with, Kiba was cut up in several pieces, Shikamaru was being choked by his own shadow, and Ino was spazzing out on the ground with foam coming out of her mouth and her eyes completely white. Kill him! Tsunade shouted as more ninja began to charge at Naruto, who was still smirking. In an incredible and almost impossible display, Naruto began cutting down shinobi from every village while dodging the occasional palm strikes from Hinata. It wasn't like they could hurt him, but he preferred not to be touched by these scum. He held out his hands, which caught the fists from both A and Tsunade and slammed them face-first into one another before dodging a spiked mace from Tenten. You should have stayed a loser orphan like you were meant to be. She snarled before charging him again. Why? It's so much more fun watching weaklings gang up on you as if they have a chance. Naruto taunted and smirked where she starting swinging the mace wildly in an attempt to kill him. Shut and die. Jumping over her and reverse thrusting his sword through her chest before beheading her, he snorted in boredom. You first. Tenten. You'll pay for that, you monster. Choji yelled as he and Shino arrived with more shinobi. Shino's eyes widened behind his bugs were incinerated upon impact from Naruto's skin, and the smirk the redhead was sending him showed he knew it. Naruto's right eye began to bleed as he yelled, Amaterasu, heavenly illumination. Dark flames began to rush towards the currently petrified group. They began throwing water jutsu after water jutsu at the flames, though it did nothing but seem to make them ignite more. Upon contact, the nin began crying and begging for the pain to stop. He frowned as Shino simply let the flames consume him while Choji tried to use his clan's jutsu in an attempt to escape. In the end, both them and their comrades were burned into ashes. With them dead, that only left one more. Hake Rokujuyan Sho, Gentle Fist Art, 8 trigrams 64 palms. Ah, there she was. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Hinata's strikes were swift and strong as she hoped to cause Naruto extreme pain and suffering, but to her anger he showed physical signs of pain. He didn't even move an inch. My turn. Her eyes widened as he let off vicious palm strikes against her chest and stomach, forcing her cough up spit and blood before sending her flying with a right hook. He snorted as he easily dispelled a genjutsu and turned to see a snarling Kurenai and Kakashi with both Mangekyo spinning as the rest of the alliance closed in on them with the appearance of a limping Tsunade, and Orochimaru. If their numbers weren't down to 300 or less, he might have been impressed by their willpower. However, it was clear they were on a do-or-die call now. Extending his arms, he uttered the words that would shake and destroy the alliance, Shinra Tensai, Almighty Push. Flashback end. The effects the jutsu had were huge. It killed the last remainder of their army, including Tsunade, who had never truly recovered from the battle versus Madara, and Orochimaru. Kakashi, Kurenai, and Hinata miraculously survived, though were quickly dealt with. He sat down on the steps of the Uzukage Tower before Temari sat down next to him, resting her head on his shoulder. If someone told me Naruto of all people would become strong enough to beat the entire alliance and win, I'd laugh in their face. Now that I'm seeing it, I don't even know how to respond. Neji said. Naruto-kun's youthfulness is unmatchable. Lee yelled. What would make Tsunade do something like this? Gaara wondered out loud. Before, I would have cared to know why my godmother would go and betray me. Now, I could care less. Naruto said as he rested on his palms. What about the rest of the nations and daimos? I doubt they'll be any less cooperative. The shorter of the redheads pointed out. You let me worry about that, but know this. The Uzumaki got up from the stairs and looked into the sky, his mouth forming a vicious grin. Uzu will be reborn. That would be the only way to explain the redhead's last few years of immortality in heaven. After he wiped out the Shinobi Alliance, many horrendous secrets surrounding Konoha and Kumo emerged. From Kumo to Konoha, secret after secret was exposed. Starting with Kumo kidnapping women and children they suspected with bloodlines and turning them into breeding stock where they would never see daylight again. Next came Konoha and Danzo's kidnapping of orphans all around the elemental nations for his root program, his illegal and inhumane dealings and experiments with Orochimaru, the civilians and shinobi council's dark dealings behind the Yondaimes, Sandames, and Godaimes' backs. Though after the war, Tsunade couldn't stop them due to the overwhelming amount of support they had and later joined them. Never mind the fact Konoha lost all their allies after the war after they called for Naruto's death after he killed the last Uchiha. He also found out the reason why Tsunade would agree to kill him. Going through her personal journal, he discovered she became a weak-willed bitch after the war, especially when the Raikage made sexual advances on not only Hinata but her as well. It just made her feel young again. Though there was one line that just really pissed him off. If I have to sell Naruto short to feel the joy of being young again, so be it, he'll understand. Besides, as a Jinchuriki, his happiness is supposed to be sacrificed in order for others to feel good. I'll just tell him when he's too broken to do anything about it. That was when any and all respect he had for the woman died. After only a few things were leaked, within the first week, you had people seeking refuge inside Uzu as they had nowhere else to go and definitely didn't want to be near either one of those villages. Zetsu had hanged into Uzu Anbu guards and were stationed everywhere in case of a sneak attack from some vengeful idiots or the occasional thugs. And there were plenty of idiots. Konoha's citizens cried for blood after finding out he not only wiped out the alliance but exposed their dark secrets. They had sent the last remaining root alive to infiltrate and destroy as much of Uzu as they could, including all the demon lovers inside. The plan failed and the Uzumaki let his displeasure and anger be known, by walking right into Konoha, killing the last of their Anbu forces, clan heads and their clans, and finally the civilians within the village. The only thing more embarrassing than the way they thought their numbers alone would beat him was how they acted like cursing and damning his name would change the fact they were going to die. He had offered the branch family of the Hyuga clan freedom from their cage bird seals, but in a show of weakness and cowardice, they decided to fight against him. Idiots. After Konoha fell, whether they were allies of Naruto or they simply decided to align with Uzu simply out of fear for their families, Uzu had numerous peace treaties waiting to be signed in hopes of avoiding utter annihilation. The Uzumaki eventually married Tamari in May after he kept his promise and gave Shion a baby, provided he stay in Uzu till he's old enough to avoid outside corruption, to continue ruling Demon Country. Uzushiogakur had thrived for decades, even after his wives and friends had all passed and he was left behind to rule alone. That had been a millennial ago. Once known as Uzumaki Naruto, destroyer of the 5 villages and the Yondaime Uzukage, he was now known as Otsutsuki Naruto, the Ashirado no Kami, god of the 10 paths, and god of chaos. After the elemental nations had fallen, swept aside, and forgotten by the development of humanity, he was left as the last remainder of the shinobi lifestyle. Approached by 3 goddesses, they offered him a new life, one with constant battle, subjects for him to rule and command, and a throne for him to rule, watching over a kingdom he could call his home and with them at his side. The first one was a blonde-haired woman that possessed a godly beauty that was only compared to her companions. Her features were delicate and her face was framed by her pale blonde hair. Her body could only be described as voluptuous with enormous breasts, wide hips, and a big perky ass. All that was covered by a tiny robe that couldn't hide her figure. This was Kami, creator of destruction and creation, mistress of angels, and goddess of life. The second one was a black-haired woman, her features as delicate as Kami's, but the shape of her face was more oval, her hair pulled into a ponytail, her red eyes shined with malice and mischievousness. Also like Kami, she had a voluptuous figure, though her breasts and ass were smaller, her hips flared more. She was wearing a black robe that had weird red marks over it. This was Yami, goddess of the underworld, and mistress of demons. The last woman also had an extreme beauty about her. Her skin was very pale, almost ashy but still lustrous. Her hair was a dark gray, leaning and covering her left eye, giving her a mysterious look, her eyes dulled with insanity and bloodlust. Her chest was petite, compared to the other 2, but still big in normal standards, but her best feature was her wider hips and her round, perky ass. Her body was barely clothed, only having a white tank top and short shorts. This was Shinigami, or Shini, goddess of death, and mistress of fallen angels. He didn't have anything to lose if he agreed. His wives, friends, and their children were gone. He had already spent years watching over Uzu and keeping peace. There weren't really any fights, and that was the one thing he missed. Fighting. No matter how much he had tried to deny it, he was a warmonger, he lived to fight. He loved to fight. He wasn't a warhawk like Danzo, but he just disliked being peaceful all the time. So he accepted. He had unknowingly opened a new life for himself. The 3 goddesses had turned him into a real god, not just one bound by the chains of one dimension, as he learned there were multiple, but able to roam and conquer if he so decided to. Of course there were those that disagreed with this, but due to the overwhelming support from other gods and goddesses, he prevailed. Imagine his shock when he found out he had an entire fan club in both heaven and hell, heaven for his heroic deeds surpassing all odds and making a name for himself, and hell for killing the arrogant and sending them down there for their enjoyment. Turns out, though unsurprising to Naruto, all his former friends and such were sent straight to hell to be judged for their crimes against him. It was amusing when he found out, to say the least, and even more funny when he heard what happened to his old teammate, the Uchiha, and all his former friends. The little shit, along with just about the rest of Konoha, even after their deaths by someone they believed as inferior to them, still believed themselves to be kings and queens. Even in hell, surrounded by thousands of demons, orcs, and the bringer of death herself, the Shinigami. Claiming how they were justified, nothing that they did was wrong, how they were above any law, insulting just about any and every demon they could, along with many of them making foul statements about some of the female demons there. It didn't go good at all. As they were easily found guilty of their crimes, they were sentenced to an eternity within hell and would work any type of punishment the demons saw fit. Of course, they all verbally raged about this, including one pink-haired banshee. Us. We're saints compared to that monster Naruto Baka. He should be down here. Not us. Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto has committed no crimes, his only sin is not killing you idiots sooner. That comment sparked the Konoha people with enough rage they began shouting slander about him, how he was nothing more than a monster, a dobe and dead last, a freak of nature, a monstrosity. Having enough of their favorite person to watch, I'll elaborate more later on, being insulted, both demons and orcs alike lunged at the humans, tearing them apart limb from limb with little to no mercy. Worst part was in hell, slaves didn't die, their body recovered, eventually. After he heard that, the Otsutsuki couldn't stop smiling for weeks. And why would he? The people that had made his life so miserable before he had became a god and could fight back, treating him as if he was lower than them or didn't deserve to live. They had finally gotten what they deserved and would feel pain for the rest of their lives every single day. Nothing could be a more fitting punishment. But back onto the fanclub business, from how the Uchiha always ran away from his fanclub who literally shouted out, "Have my babies Sasuke-kun." And from seeing how pathetic both Ino and Sakura were with their fangirl mentalities, he thought they were nothing more than a curse. Oh, how wrong he was. Weak-willed, physically lacking fangirls who cared for nothing more than how they looked and went as far to degrade others on how they looked in order to feel better about themselves were easily the worst. Always dreaming about their knight in shining armor coming to save them, never training, saying it wasn't for a real woman. Then you had fangirls that not only took care of their body but trained, instead focusing on how to be an equal to their crush instead of hopelessly praying and dreaming of him saving her, then they would kiss like in a fairy tale. He had met many like that, from goddesses to demons, both had worshipped him on a fanatical level which scared him honestly. Apparently from watching his dimension and watching him grow stronger despite the obstacles that did their best to hold him back, he grew stronger and eventually killed them all, thus earning many to like him. He had learned from Kami that there were all kinds of dimensions featuring him as the child of the prophecy. Though many weren't pleasant. Not pleasant at all. There were those where he had been used by his own parents for their sick and twisted goals before they discarded him like he was trash. Ones where he had a sister, who was given Kurama during the sealing and treated like a princess, whereas he was forgotten and eventually abandoned due to him not having any talent. Ones where he had been manipulated by the Sandame, Jiraiya, and Tsunade to be a dumb, hyperactive idiot who wore orange and shouted about being Hokage while knowing as little jutsu as possible before they betrayed him, killing him in the end with smirks on their faces. His only purpose being to make sure Konoha was the strongest village in shinobi history. When asked what he would do about it, he gave an answer that would make Madara run in fear. They will know pain. He finally understood what Madara, Nagato, and Obito meant. In reality, true peace where everyone was happy without fights or wars was a fool's dream. Something unreachable. There was darkness in everyone, and when brought to the light, it turned the person ugly. In every dimension where he was betrayed, manipulated, or used, he could see darkness coming from everyone around as they avoided him like the plague. When his own sister taunted him for being the reject loser their parents gave up for not being good enough, he snapped. The longer you live, the more you realize reality is just made of pain, suffering, and emptiness. He had brought each world to their knees before wiping them out. Starting with the ones who betrayed him. Everyone felt it, the darkness within him coming to rise. Flashback. The arena was dead silent. No one could comprehend what exactly had just happened. The Namikaze prodigy was dominating her loser of a brother while people in the stands laughed along with Yondaime and his wife. Insulting him, degrading him, proving he was nothing more than a lost cause. Then it happened. The boy clutched his head in pain before he let out a roar of rage, and black chakra roared from within him as his body began to change physically. His midget height of 4 feet 8 changed to 5 feet 8, his dirty blonde hair turned a blood red with black tips, his chest more ripped along with the six-pack he now sported. His clothing going from that hideous neon orange to black shinobi pants, his once yellow teeth now turned in sharp pearly whites, and the immense darkness coming from him. But what really shocked both the civilians and shinobi alike was the mangekyo and rinnegan he sported in his eyes and the 2 white horns he sported on his head. His skin turned dark black as a star formed on top of his nose, but in the middle of his eyes as well. His sister was visibly shaking in fear before she tried to put up a tough front. Ha. Ni ice genjutsu loser, but it doesn't mean anything. You still won't win, and mommy and daddy will always love me more than you. She taunted. The smirk that graced the now redhead's face was unsettling to many, so I could care less about the Namikaze and his whore. They were never there for me when I was little, so I definitely don't expect them to be there for me now. In fact, I expect them to even try to help you should I beat you so badly in front of them. He laughed. You beat me? Ha. Remember the last time you managed to beat me? Mommy kicked you out the oof. She was cut off by a foot placing itself directly in her stomach, sending her flying into the wall. I remember well. The whore beat me because I beat her favorite child in a duel that was supposed to be completely one-sided. He grinned up at the fuming Minato and Kushina, who were glaring daggers at him, hoping he would burn alive. Tell me, Namikaze, is there any Uzumaki left in you, or did that die after that Toad Sanin told you and Minato about that so-called prophecy? Their shocked faces said it all. Surprised. It's funny what a 6-year-old can find out when no one gives a about him and never checks up on him. You never even questioned what would happen to me after Minato told you of the fame it would bring both of you if my beloved sister fulfilled the prophecy. How cute. Naruto sidestepped as his sister slammed an incomplete Rasengan into the ground, an attack that was obviously meant to kill him. Shut up. So what if they realized I was the only good thing they had in the family? You're a loser playing ninja. A outcast. No one likes you. Just fall in a hole and die somewhere. She shouted. Will do, he said before he disappeared. Only to appear right in his face and grip her stomach hard, directly where the seal was. But first, I want the 9 tails, he said with a predatory grin. He had never felt so alive after letting his darkness roam free. Of course, the Yondaime and his wife, along with their entire shinobi force, rained down on him with the intent to kill after seeing him pull Kurama from his sister, whose name he still didn't bother to know. He dealt with them quite easily, beating them within an inch of their lives and sending the world in a state of panic. After all, if someone could easily beat the Yondaime, his wife, and Konoha's entire shinobi force and not break a sweat, what was stopping him from coming after them? However, not everyone was against what he did. The Fire Daimyo, for instance, demanded answers the instant Minato and Kushina awoke. They had tried to avoid the question as best they could, but the threat of removing all funding the village broke that. They did admitted everything, from abandoning Naruto, to ignoring him, treating him like a bug, all because he wasn't a part the prophecy Jiraiya spoke of. The daimyo didn't like that one bit. So you mean to tell me your child because of some damned prophecy? You don't understand, Natsumi could be the savior of the world. She had to be given all our attention and love. So what if that brat didn't have anyone? You can see he's still nothing more than a pest. You ignorant bitch. That so-called pest just beat you all without so much as a sweat. I felt more power come from him than I've ever felt come from that so-called child of the prophecy. How dare you talk about my daughter like that? Fire daimyo or not, you will not degrade my daughter for that creature. That creature, as you call him, has just made Konoha his #1 enemy, and I assure you, should he take vengeance on your miserable lives, he will not be reprimanded. You can't do that. I won't let you. Try me. He sighed, remembering how he had killed the bitch with chakra chains, her shock and hatred fully known to the world. The Yondaime fell shortly after, victim of his oh so precious Horaitian. Then came the Toad Sage to avenge his student and stop what the Toads had called the God of Chaos. He failed humiliatingly, death by naked women who killed him while he scribbled perversely in his notebook. Loser. With those three dead, the rest of Konoha fell easily as each and every one of them after seeing their strongest ninja fall easily charged blindly in rage. It was like for all the other timelines as well, he showed no mercy to those who betrayed him. Though he had to say, coming back from the dead was a new feeling. He absolutely loved the look of shock and fear on their faces when he came back after years and raised them to the ground. Crying, pleading for mercy. He gave none. Afterwards, he became a conqueror of sorts. He traveled to different worlds as a visitor to see what they were like. He found many that were being oppressed by evil beings and people forced into slavery, whether as workers or sex slaves for the more lustful, greedy men. He took on the last name Otsutsuki after a meeting with the Shinju Council, who were also fans of his surprisingly, and they were more than happy to see he wasn't abusing his power but instead using it to wipe worlds of corruption. He was appointed with the title, God of Chaos, as he was the most intertwined with his inner demons. Unlike Yami, who only swelled in the darkness, or Kami, who swelled in the light, or even Shinny, who had brushed with both sides often. Naruto fully embraced both the dark and light and had bonded them together, which made him incredibly dangerous as his power rivaled only Kami's, though she said with how many people were currently worshipping him, he had bound to pass her any day. Yeah, life was pretty good for Naruto indeed as a god. The redhead grunted as a woman bounced on top of him, moaning loudly as her breasts swayed with her bouncing. The woman in question had a curvy figure with big breasts, a nice gropable ass, with blue cat's ears, and two blue tails with white fur lining it. The straps of her tank top had fallen along with her shirt to her waist as she bounced. This was none other than the Two Tails Biju, Nibi. Like many other female demons, Nibi had taken a liking to him because of the power he possessed. It also helped he was incredibly well endowed. Naruto leaned up and began kissing Nibi's neck, wrapping his arms around her waist before thrusting up. Before he could come in her, a knock came on the door. Whoever it is, go the away. Naruto barked. Naruto-sama, Yami-sama requests your presence. A soft voice said from the other side. Quote exclamation mark quote. He growled before exploding within the two-tailed demon woman. Naruto oh 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 oh, Nibi screamed before she passed out on top of him. The Otsutsuki chuckled, removing her and placing her comfortably on the bed. He didn't need to worry about covering her since people knew better than to enter his room unannounced. He opened the door to see a dark-skinned female with black hair, with bangs that covered her right eye, golden eyes that had hints of lust, a revealing red-colored navy robe, with a large hemline on the front that exposed her arms, the lateral parts of her huge breasts and her belly. Hello, Kira. He smiled. The brunette bowed to show respect, then gave him a smile. I apologize for the interruption. Yami-sama told me it was urgent. Emma needed your immediate attention. I understand, he said with another smile. Naruto and Kira had met during his visit in the underworld when he went to laugh at his former comrades. He had enjoyed that time immensely, especially after their befitting roles. Ino, Tsunade, and Hinata were literal that got passed around from orc to demon to demon. Ino, from what he heard, caved as soon as the first dick went inside her, unsurprisingly. Hinata and Tsunade had put up resistance, but after being gangbanged for 8 straight times, they inevitably caved in. The two had met while Naruto was mocking the three while they were being, calling them whores, and Kira had joined in, and soon after the two had formed somewhat of a friendship. Eventually they came upon a throne room that only rivaled Naruto's in terms of space and room. Though whereas Naruto's throne room was filled with Uzumaki paintings, decorations, and occasionally the heads of his enemies, this one was completely bland and white. I do believe this is where we part, Naruto-sama. Kira said. It is. Do take care of yourself for me. Naruto said as he walked inside. Naruto smiled as he saw his 3 favorite people ever in his life. Naruto-kun. The redhead was immediately glomped between breasts courtesy of the three goddesses. "Ma, I'm happy to see you too," he mumbled. "You must be wondering why you were called here." Upon Naruto's nod, Yami continued. "It's a buoy and nuisance we should have just killed long ago. Ao has escaped his confinement and ran off hoping to find more power in hopes to conquer you and eventually defeat and force us to marry him." The Otsutsuki's eye twitched. Ao was an Otsutsuki who was outraged with the fact the Shinju Council had chosen Naruto as the Ashirado no Kami and not him. He was also somehow related to Tonari, Momoshiki, and Kinshiki, so obviously he had pure hatred for the redhead. He had challenged Naruto in front of everyone for the title and the power he wielded before saying he'd make Yami, Kami, and Shinny his wives before taking over everything. It was an incredibly pathetic, and the fight, if you could call it that, was short as Naruto embarrassed the man and basically gave him a handicap. The fight wasn't close, just like no one expected it to be. Ao, humiliated to the point of no return, decided to strike at Naruto, whose back was turned only to get blinded and beaten an inch within his life again. Afterwards he was imprisoned with a bunch of other criminals that rebelled against either Kami, Yami, and Shinny. How did he escape? That place is supposed to be locked down tightly. The three goddesses shrugged. All we know is that he and the other inmates formed an escape plan and broke out. Shinny said. "And do you know where he's going?" Naruto asked. Upon the three avoiding his eyes, he grew annoyed. "Just tell me," he said. "He's heading to the only place you can obtain biju-tailed beasts," Kami said, still avoiding her eyes. Naruto's eyes widened in understanding before he snarled. "The elemental nations." Naruto had made it clear to everyone that the elemental nations was his domain and his domain only. To go into it meant your life was forfeit. "You want me to go in after him, don't you?" Yami nodded. "You're the only one who knows chakra as such a high level, plus you're the only one who can defeat an entire group of Otsutsuki. The others cannot and would simply die." He sighed before nodding. Every day a new dimension of the elemental nations was created, some different, some the same, and some incredibly dark. Though Kami had easily made sure nothing got out of hand by sending him to wipe out everyone in it should they get too wild. "I will die along with my traitorous clansmen. I assure you of that," Naruto said as he turned and walked out the throne room. His eternal Mangekyo spinning rapidly in his right eye. "You will soon see the full power of the Ashirado no Kami Otsutsuki Ao, believe it." Uzumaki Kushina was not the happiest of women, and she hadn't been for a long time. The day she was giving birth to her daughter, Naomi, a masked man claiming to be Uchiha Madara threatened to kill both her and her child before ripping the kyuubi from her stomach. Her husband Namikaze Minato had fought off the masked man before going into this mad rant about how his daughter would be the greatest weapon Konoha ever had. "You don't get it, Kushina. I never loved you. You were a great, that's all, a means to sire me an heir I could control. Now with you out of the way, I can raise this girl to be my ultimate weapon, and Konoha will be the strongest shinobi village that ever existed." Something inside Kushina became cold and dark that day, and it only grew larger as the village, Konohagakure village in the Hidden Leaves, demanded her child be killed for having the kyuubi sealed within her or made into a weapon. Hitaki Kakashi and Jiraiya didn't take too kindly to their sensei, student, being killed and had attempted to kill Naomi on multiple occasions, though were foiled time and time again either by the Sandaime Hokage, Mitarashi Anko, Inuzuka Sume, or herself. Mitarashi Anko had been the only one of her three students to stand by and support her during her time of need. Being an outcast herself, Anko knew all about being hated and disliked for something out of her control, and thus had stuck by her sensei. The same could not be said for her other students, Azuki Yugao and Yuhi Kurenai. As she found out from Anko, Kurenai had always been jealous of Kushina for having Minato's attention while she didn't. Instead, she had decided to get under the Uzumaki's wing and learn things secretly about Minato in hopes of wooing him away. When that didn't work, Kurenai had tried multiple times to poison Kushina. Thankfully, the kyuubi had made the poisons relatively harmless, thus foiling Kurenai's plans. Upon finding out the kyuubi was sealed within her daughter, she had attempted to place Kushina in a genjutsu and kill Naomi secretly in honor of the Yondaime but failed as Kushina got out the genjutsu easily before threatening the Chunin, at the time, with death. Her other student, Azuki Yugao, was one she had high hopes for, someone she taught the art of kenjutsu, so to see her betray her was annoying, to put it nicely. Yugao stated she wanted no part with Kushina or her demon spawn, as she called Naomi, wanting no deal with the village outcasts so it wouldn't damage her reputation with any of her higher-up officers. Kushina's response: kicking her ass, quite literally. The ones who hit her hardest was the betrayal of 3 of her best friends in Uchiha Makoto and Hyuga Hitomi, and Nara Yoshino, who when Kushina asked for support simply stated that in Uchiha, Hyuga didn't assist such lower-ranking class people such as her. Yoshino simply said he would be too bothersome and she had more to worry about than her and her little hellspawn. Kushina, being a censor, immediately went to see if they were being affected by any seals to make them switch up. There were none. Her last loyal best friend, one Inuzuka Sume, who had been the redhead's best friend far longer than either of the others, had stood by Kushina's side till the end, regardless of the fact a few of her clansmen died in the Kyuubi's rampage or not. She claimed the Inuzuka clan would have her back through whatever she needed, and as such they did. The Sandaime, Sarutobi Hiruzen, while angered and saddened at the death of his wife, asked just happened during the birth. She had told him everything, excluding Minato's madman rant, about the man claiming to be Madara, Minato being taken by the Shinigami, how his Sharingan could control the 9 tails. Once he understood, he did not harbor any ill will against her daughter. However, that was only 3 people in a clan that supported her. They were against any entire village that wanted her daughter dead or used as a weapon. As a result, she had grew exceptionally cold towards anyone that showed her child malice. Her kind side had only been seen by her child, Anko, Sume, or Sarutobi. Growing up, Naomi had been influenced by her mother a lot, often acting like her so much she developed an ice-cold personality as well. Kushina had made sure her daughter was well trained, teaching her how to wield a sword, jutsu, and even the Uzumaki clan's chakra chains, which were black. When Sarutobi questioned her on this, she gave him a reply that instantly shut him up. When my daughter finally goes to the academy, do you think they'll give her a fair chance like the rest of those brats? No, they'll do any and everything in their power to make sure she fails and gets held back. I won't let that happen. Once Naomi had finally started going to the academy, Kushina was right. The instructors and teachers had done their best to embarrass her, asking questions no Chunin would be able to answer, let alone academy student. When she often asked Naomi about her classmates, she only had one thing to describe them: losers. And she was right. Her classmates were quite frankly losers in all of the sense. Inuzuka Kiba, the son of Sume, believed he was the shit, and thought he was an alpha of sorts. He had attempted to talk to Naomi multiple times, though was blown off multiple times. Nara Shikamaru, the son of Yoshino, was the definition of a slacker, though she knew all Nara men were incredibly smart. He just didn't do anything right as far as, well, anything. All he did was sleep and stare at clouds. Akamaiki Choji was a fat kid who just ate chips all day and got bullied because of his weight, plus he was friends with the Nara boy. Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura, or as Anko and Naomi called them, the Banshee sisters, were nothing more than fangirls who just fought over one boy, never trained or exercised, and spent time stalking said boy or attempting to make themselves look pretty. All 3 thought they would easily be good one-night stands growing up. Uchiha Sasuke, son of Makoto, the said boy of the girl's affection, was a emo, duck-haired brat who thought the world owed him something. Ever since his sister Itako, female Itachi, murdered the Uchiha clan save him, the village had babied the boy silly, giving him stuff for free, giving him free lessons on jutsu and everything else. He had tried to show up Naomi multiple times only to get beaten quite savagely, earning the hate of his fan club and the people of Konoha even more, not that she cared. Hyuga Hinata, daughter of Hitomi, was easily one of the worst clan heirs Kushina had ever seen. The girl had no confidence, no self-esteem, she flinched at everything and fainted at almost nothing. She had even heard from Anko that Hitomi herself was planning on disowning the girl soon if she didn't start acting like a real Hyuga, as she put it. Aburame Shino was simply a member of the Aburame clan and one who was disliked by the entire class simply for being a loser who plays with bugs. Naomi had excelled despite the civilian councils and instructors' best plots and became Kunoichi of the Year. Not that the title meant much considering it wasn't even a race, seeing how she bested her classmates in literally everything. Hiruzen, seeing how anyone else would take the chance to kill Naomi if she was placed within their team, he gave her dual senseis in Anko and Kushina. This of course caused conflict as the Shinobi Council and Civilian Council demanded Sasuke get 2 senseis or they would have a serious problem. Sarutobi's response was to pull up the long list of crimes they had committed under his and Minato's rule. That of Kaos had sent them running out of his office in a flash. Though all of that anger and malice could not describe how Kushina was currently feeling right now. They had been given a C-ranked mission to guard a bridge builder named Tazuna and protect him from a grimy businessman named Gato who was oppressing Wave Country. The mission had been turned to an A- ranked as they had been attacked by the Demon Brothers who they disposed of easily. However, their real problem came as a group of 10 men surrounded them, all grinning evilly. They however didn't come for the bridge builder but instead for Naomi, or more precisely the Kyuubi's chakra, in order to beat and kill him, whoever he was. The 3 had put up a good fight, but considering each man the chakra amount of a 2-tailed biju, tailed beast, they didn't stand a chance. And thus there as we are now. Their client Tazuna dead, having his stomach cut wide open. A look of horror on his face. Naomi, Anko, and her on the ground glaring at the men as they surrounded them. Oh, and it was raining. Oi boss, we should have some fun with them before we take the Kyuubi's chakra. It's been a while since we last have seen any females. One of them said, earning approval from the others. Their bodies are appealing, especially the older redheads. Fine, we'll make 'em scream our names first. Might even keep them around as pets afterwards. The leader, a man with shaggy black hair and a tannish brown skin color, said. Idiots. A new arrival said. Anko, Kushina, and Naomi's eyes all widened as a man standing at 6 feet 7 came into the clearing. An annoyed look plastered on his scarred face. His skin was snow white, he also wore a dark gray kimono with markings around it. He had spiky, dirty white hair along with a pair of horn-like protrusions extending from either side of his forehead along with pupilless white eyes. Ao-sama, I thought you would be waiting for us to arrive back at that human's place. A red-haired man said. That was the plan, however, I came due to the fact something rubs me the wrong way here and I don't like it at all. The man said. Do you have a problem with that? Of course not. So that's the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Doesn't look like much. He insulted, causing Naomi to growl. Boss, can we have the 2 women? They look so defying, I just wanna break 'em. A brown-haired asked. Al waved his hand, you can do whatever you want with them, I only care for the 9 tails chakra. What the hell do you even want with the Kyuubi anyway? Anko shouted. Since I see no harm in telling you, since you aren't going to be telling anyone anyway, I was once a feared general of the Shinju Council, worshipped by many and feared by all. He took a moment to emphasize the point by spreading his arms, to which all 3 girls rolled their eyes. Then his face turned into a scowl, until that damned Uzumaki Naruto came around, favored by those whores they called goddesses. They wanted to bestow upon him the power only an elite such as myself had the right to claim. The Ashirado no Kami, a title known to everyone that instantly inspired fear into the hearts of everyone, commanding beasts only known to the one who wields the title. Kushina, Naomi, and Anko's eyes widened. Uzumaki. That brat walked in and beat me while I was weak. Even then he was only able to escape thanks to those bitches intervening and saving his miserable life. They locked me away so there would be no one to challenge him. By now, by going to the place he gained such power, I will reign supreme and take my rightful place as ruler of the gods. He finished. earning roars of approval from his henchmen.